Luna, the silver pearl, the moon. It's been used for a reason or an excuse for lunatic-type behavior. It governs the tides, and it was the obsession of two great superpowers. Science tells us it formed more than 4.5 billion years ago. But was it actually delivered? Is the moon a spaceship? This week, the Jackalopes will explore the theories of Spaceship Moon. I'm Floyd Whiting.
I'm Aaron Linden.
I'm Steve Sisson.
And I'm Emmy Whiting.
And those introductions are catching me right in the butt.
You nailed it both times.
Both of them sounded great.
It's one of the greatest parts about like when you do theater or commercials or whatever. They're like, "That was perfect. Let's do it again."
I also was just like, did you for that little beginning part? Did you just type in the moon in the good old thesaurus?
Yeah.
Oh, right. No, actually, I looked up nicknames for the moon.
Ah.
I want to know the most ridiculous one.
Well, silver pearl.
Silver
I mean,
pearl
there's
is
actually
kinda,
there's not a lot, believe it or not. There's most of the time it just went into like names that religions gave the moon through the years, and I was like, well, I don't want to touch on that. But one thing that always like Luna is the name of our moon. Mm-hmm. And Sol is actually the name of our sun, and a lot of people don't understand that. And before I go off in like my tangent here, where we go into Spaceship Moon, there was one point where I was in a desert, and I was actually I got to stand between the sun that was setting and the moon that was coming up, and it was like perfectly imbalanced for just a moment. And I thought, remember this, because I am right in the center of these two amazing celestial bodies. Because in the desert,
that's where his superpowers came from.
Right.
Yeah,
it was actually really cool because you know how
electricity flowed. And
oh, it's great. What are the chances of that actually happening?
Right in the epicenter.
Yeah, and we'd just gotten off of a pretty tough mission, so I was standing there, and there's no mountains in the desert, so as one is going down, the other one's coming up, and it was just really cool.
Wow.
And I was like, make a mental note of this. Never going to happen again.
Did they both look really large?
Actually, they did. And for some reason, like when the sun is going down over there, it doesn't like lose light. It's just light, and then all of a sudden it's not.
Yeah.
See, like here in the West, we've got all these mountains, right? So dawn and dusk take forever.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
twilight.
it's like a time period, you know, because it's behind the mountains, and then you see the sun behind the mountains, and so it's still light outside. Yeah. But in the desert, when the sun goes down, it's dark.
Lights out.
I mean, it's lights out because it is back behind the world. And so seeing
Flat
that
Earth.
come up, because the thing of it is like
firmament.
over the
yeah.
edge.
And I know they weren't perfectly lined up because I wouldn't have been able to see the moon, right? But I could see it. So it was just a moment where I was like, remember this.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. My guys were actually fueling up the truck so we could head back out. But all right, with a radius of about 1,080 miles, the moon is less than a third the width of the Earth. If the Earth was the size of a nickel, the moon would be about the size of a coffee bean. So the moon is on average about 238,000 miles away from the Earth. And so that means that 30 Earth-sized planets could fit between the Earth and the moon. And what a lot of people don't know, and I had heard this, and I haven't looked up details, but the moon is slowly getting farther away from the sun, or from the Earth. Yep. What's the rate? It's like an inch every year.
Like very slow.
Inch.
It's ridiculous, but it's
Every 4 years, maybe?
She's
Something like
slowly drifting away from us.
Which means that like solar eclipses, total solar eclipses, will be a thing of the past at some point.
Correct.
Right. Like, could you imagine that? How sad that would be?
Yeah, we live in a
Everyone's
time
just
period where that just happens to be a thing.
And if we're still around, you know, I don't know, millions of years from now, Saturn is losing its rings. The moon is drifting away. Like, our descendants, millions of years from now, if we're even still here, which I doubt we will be, but the sky and the planets and everything will look so different that they'll sit there and be like, hey, the history books tell us it used to have rings and that the moon used to be right there.
And you'll have a bunch of people go, no, that's not
That's
true.
not, that's all fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news. All right, so Hollow Moon. It goes with Spaceship Moon. So I kind of looked at both of them as the same hypothesis, right? Hollow Moon hypothesis, though, usually proposes that the moon is hollow from like natural formation, natural reasons. That when it was forming, there's still cavernous areas within the moon itself, which, to be totally honest, is probably actually the reason why we'll get into some crazy science about the moon, because the moon is really weird. But so Hollow Moon can have, logical explanations as to why some of these scientific findings come up the way that they do. But Spaceship Moon actually goes hand in hand with something that we talked about, I think it was either last week or 2 weeks ago, which is prison Earth theory. That essentially the moon is kind of the guard tower, watching over us. And I talked about a theory of soul recycling during that episode, and that the moon plays a key role in that theory, that the moon itself is actually the device, or on the moon is the device that captures the soul and sends it back to Earth. And so we're stuck in this constant loop. The Buddhists call it samsara, where you will be reincarnated over and over again until you finally get it right and you can leave this plane of existence. Spaceship Moon, though, that's different. That's got some nefarious theories behind it. And to move on to that, I'll go to Aaron, because I want him to actually tell you about, where did people think that the moon came from? Well, some people think that the moon came from, and what does it really serve?
Aaron is bouncing in a seat.
I know.
Yeah, he's good to go. So, Aaron, I'm going to switch over to you, because this stuff, and the thing of it is, we don't know.
But that's the great thing, and I'll get to a quote from a doctor at NASA later.
The word cheese doesn't show up in your anywhere, does it?
Okay, listen. I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
I
Cheese
wanted
moon.
to, and then Floyd was like, that'll be funny for 2 seconds. That will not.
Yes, and we've now just gone over those 2 seconds.
No.
Eclipse.
I'm saying
Eclipse
it's
the
going to
joke.
look like a Swiss cheese in the middle, because now we know it's got hollow parts.
Yes.
Look like a Swiss
Ah,
cheese
that
in the
makes
middle.
a lot of sense.
But like the
and that's
hardness,
the show.
the hardness of a Parmesan. You know what I'm saying?
The crust on the outside.
Yes.
I like that.
Anyway.
So there is no hardcore scientific data to show how the moon was created. There's a lot of theories, and one of them is, it's one of the most accepted theories, is the giant impact hypothesis that you were talking about. 4.5 billion years ago, a Mars-sized object hit the Earth, and all the cast-off debris got caught and formed the moon. The issue with that, though, is the moon rocks on the outside of the moon, the ones that you can just pick up, are older than the rocks found at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
So there's no rhyme or reason as to why they're that old. So another thought is multiple impact theory, whereby many smaller impacts cast off material, and little by little it formulated the moon over a longer period of time. And then there's the capture concept. Moon just happened to be strolling by and it got caught, which is almost impossible
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't
for
think
an object that size.
the fact that it is as spherical as it is. I mean, most of those objects are pretty lumpy, rocky, asteroid-looking things.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this thing's
Yeah,
probably
like-
formed out of something that was molten at some point.
A lot of Jupiter's moons look more like potatoes.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
They don't really have this perfect sphere.
Yeah.
So then the possible explanation that I like the best is it's a spaceship that was brought here by an alien species. But if you check this out, there's stories from ancient texts that talk about before the moon. And if you take a second and really think about that, before the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So Job 25:5 says, before there was a moon and it did not shine. Psalms 72:5 states, thou wast feared since the time of the sun and before the time of the moon, a generation of generations. Then there's ancient Greek tribes living in the area of Arcadia, and they were known as the Prosellenos, which means pre-lunar, or people that predated the moon. Aristotle even wrote about it, and he wondered if the moon isn't much newer than what we've been led to believe. There's ancient civilizations that have writings about the fact that the atmosphere was a lot different prior to the moon, that the air was a mist with a lot less sunlight coming through. Take notes, Bill Gates. And that when the moon came to be, the mist fell in a period of nonstop rain, which would correlate to many of the flood theories that we see in cultures around the world.
Almost every culture has a flood myth.
Every one of them that I've looked into, when we did some of the flood stuff, it was like, there's got to be something to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
They all write about it. In a book called World in Collision, the author, Emmanuel Veleksavi, states that ancient cultural texts from around the world, Mayan, Chinese, Hebrew, state that around anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, Venus also abruptly appeared in the night sky, that it ripped through the night sky, changing the Earth's tilt. And that may have been around the same time that the moon came to be. The odd thing here is that the ancient cultures actually operated on a 360-day calendar cycle, and each culture has stories for when the Earth was actually still. So when Venus came out and the moon showed up, it actually changed the tilt of the Earth and changed the length of the years. The Bible says Joshua wrote about how the sun stood still in the sky for a whole day. Well, at the exact same time, ancient text from China says they were cast into perpetual night, which is very bizarre. So another theory is that the moon was placed near the Earth around the same time that the pyramids were constructed. This is my favorite thing that I found. And that the moon broadcast frequencies down upon us through the pyramids scattered throughout the world that are all in alignment with Orion, which keeps us in a constant being of three-dimensional life.
Ooh. Wow. Okay.
I love that one. But if you think about that, if that were the case, it would explain a lot of the unexplainable things. If we're trapped in a third dimension by the frequencies that the moon's broadcasting through the pyramids, which we just did a show on pyramids, go back and watch that. How easy would it be if you're a fourth through X dimensional being to be like, oh, yeah, we can go there. We can bop in, and then we just hit our cloaking device again, and we're out, whether it's Bigfoot or UFOs or whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. So we talked about how the rocks of the moon on the surface are much older than the rocks that are below the surface rocks on the moon, which is opposite of what you find here on Earth. As well, no matter how large the impact craters are, the depth is almost uniformly the same, which would indicate that maybe the rocks and dust are covering a harder interior shell.
It can't pierce any farther than a very specific depth.
Even though some of the craters are very small, some are miles and miles and miles. They're all the same uniform depth, which I think is very bizarre. In 1970, we have a theory from the Soviet Academy of Sciences, Vasen, and I'm going to butcher this name, Shracherbakov, that the moon is a hollowed out spaceship.
It was good. Yeah.
I'm not Russian. Then in November 20th, 1969, and most people know about this one, Apollo 12 deliberately crashed the ascent stage of the lunar module into the moon's surface, and NASA reported that the moon rang like a bell for almost an hour.
Which I just find so terrifying. I don't know why I find it so creepy.
I think it's amazing.
It gets weirder.
Yeah.
Because Apollo 13 then crashed a larger module into the moon, and it rang for over 3 hours. And the further down the vibrations from the ringing went, we're talking 40 miles deep, the faster they became, which would indicate hollowness.
Yeah.
Whereas on Earth, it doesn't happen because we've got such a dense core. So they tell us. Then there's Isaac Asimov's observation, which states, what makes a total eclipse so remarkable is the sheer astronomical accident that the moon fits so snugly over the sun. The moon is just large enough to cover the sun completely at times, so that there is a temporary night falls and the stars spring out. The sun's great distance makes up for its greater size, and the result is that the moon and the sun appear to be equal in size. There is no astronomical reason why the moon and sun should fit so well. In the sheerest of coincidences, and only the Earth among all planets is blessed in this fashion.
Mm-hmm.
The other weird thing about it is it's the only celestial object that has one side facing us constantly.
Yeah, it doesn't rotate.
Because they don't want us to know what's going on the backside. That's why. Moon's 25% of the Earth's size, yet has 1% of the Earth's density. Sounds hollow to me. Then there's the fact that the moon always has the same side facing us. And then a recent discovery, as of July 22nd, 2024, they found a massive cave on the moon and theorized that it is a hollowed out lava tube that could provide future explorations with a safe haven from the moon's harsh surface environment. So maybe is it just so many caverns within the moon that it appears hollow? It has a less dense weight than the Earth. But what's in there?
Yeah.
That's the big question. I'm going with lizard people, clearly. There was a National Geographic article that said there are probably hundreds to thousands of caves on the moon formed from drained lava tubes. I say, personally, it's an intricate network of passageways for the lizard people, which is why then they have those same types of passageways under DIA in Denver, because that's what they're used to.
Yeah. Yep.
NASA's Dr. Robin Brett stated that it seems much easier to explain the non-existence of the moon than its existence because of all of the anomalies that are associated with it. How about this? The moon's rusting. What do you need for rust? Steve knows.
Iron.
And?
Oxygen.
And?
Water.
Yeah. Are there oxygen and water on the moon? Nope. So data from the Chandrayaan-1 space probe and the moon mineralogy mapping revealed the presence of hematite, a type of iron oxide on the moon's surface. Hematite is a form of rust that usually requires oxygen and water. Hey, good job. And scientists have little understanding as to how or why this is happening. One theory is that the moon passes through the Earth's magnetic tail 6 times out of the 28-day lunar cycle. And during that time, some of the oxygen and water molecules could be making it to the moon, causing it to rust. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
You didn't sound confident.
Yeah. Hematite's kind of an interesting word because hematite's the mineral that shares a linguistic origin with hemoglobin, as both words come from the Greek word hema, which means blood. And that's where we get blood moon from. Edgar Mitchell, astronaut on Apollo 14, claimed that they felt an overwhelming sense of a presence watching them while they were there. And to this day, you can still go and look up. It happens so often, and I can't, like LAPs or something, it's like lunar, there's flashes of light that are going on within these craters. And in one particular crater, several times a year, a blue mist forms. And then it just goes away. Some people say that that's nuclear reactors being fired up. Some people say that it's just natural light anomalies that are reflecting, glassy areas when the sun hits it just right. Mm-hmm. But I really think that there's a story from Samaria of 2 brothers that actually came down from the sky, Anunnaki, that placed the moon there, and that it's actually full of lizard people, which I love. I think that's exactly
just full of lizards.
It's not half full, completely full of lizards.
Completely full of lizard people.
They're busting out.
It's teeming with
They
them.
like the tunnels there. Talked about the lizard people and the tunnels under L.A. and the Native American tribes would talk about them. They're tunnel dwellers. DIA. It makes perfect sense, actually.
And there's a lot of structures on the moon that individuals don't really talk about too much unless you watch certain programs on television, which and they'll touch on it a lot. But NASA doesn't like talking about these things, but there is photographic evidence out there. One structure is a humongous satellite-looking thing. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of explanations for certain things. Seeing a face where we don't see a face. What's that called?
Pareidolia.
Pareidolia. So you end up getting this thing, and you kind of start seeing what you want to see. But some of these objects are almost indisputable. Like that, the satellite would be humongous, like miles across, gigantic thing. But boy, it looks like a satellite. It looks almost unmistakably like a satellite.
Well, and there's giant spires
All over the place. Yeah.
all over the place.
But and NASA does scrub stuff out of their photos,
They do.
which really, really bothers me.
It
Because
bothers me too because I'm like, why?
Why are you doing
You
that?
tell me
well,
why.
the funny thing though is that so you can still find some old video footage of people looking at the pictures of the spires and the satellite and things like that. The original photos gone,
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Go
and
on.
I'm like, why are those gone?
and there's certain videotapes that disappear having to do with the moon, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, we think we recorded over it. With what? Old episodes of Scooby-Doo? Who records over that? Who
Okay.
just walks in and
but
does that?
If it was Scooby Doo, I probably would
Yeah,
too.
I mean, depending on which seasons we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the original, Where Are You? Yeah.
Okay,
all
yeah,
about that.
the old one's good.
The real issue becomes though, so we go. And in a couple of interviews, you go back and watch some of the astronauts that went, and during their interview,
Oh,
it
man.
was not all this excitement and all that.
Dead
they
silent.
looked somber in one, and I don't know who it was. If it was like Cooper or Aldrin or somebody was like, well, we are at the dawn of a new time. And you're like, what does that mean? Like, what did you see up there that caused us to, one, not go back?
Yeah.
Well, we lost the technology. What? We lost it? That was freaking 60s. Like, we're so far advanced from that.
They planned on like bases on the moon by
Right.
the 80s. It was going to be like the suburb of Earth. Just
Right.
head on up to the moon.
Move to Moon Acres.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
We haven't been back, I think, because we were told not to go back. In so many words. Aliens show up and they're like, you know what? This isn't going to be like Everest, where you're just leaving your oxygen tanks everywhere, okay? Like, take your crap and get out of here and don't come back.
You're going to pick that up.
Right.
You're going to pick that up and put
You
it in your
don't
pocket.
litter here.
We've already left a bunch of stuff up there.
I know.
We have like the lunar landers. They've got certain module parts that are there.
Yeah, the base of it is left there. 'Cause
Yep.
that's the launch pad.
That's
for the,
left there.
Yeah.
The truck, I can't remember what the rover.
Little cars.
The
that
little
drove
cars
around,
are
yeah.
there. We've left certain reflectors there because we wanted to do like some sort of distance
Laser test.
experiment.
Yeah, there's been
Yeah.
a bunch of probes and stuff that have crashed into it or stayed there. For
Well,
whatever reason.
yeah, and like Aaron said, we literally intentionally crashed certain parts of the
Right.
spacecraft
And
into
now
it.
China's put stuff up there.
Yeah, now
and-
they've got their probe. They're on the back side of the moon.
Yeah,
and-
are they? Are
Well,
they?
the thing of it is, in the Chinese one though, caught a photo. The U-22, I believe that's how it's pronounced. It spotted a mystery object on the horizon while it was working its way across the von Karaman crater, and on the far side of the moon. This is a very cube-looking object, okay? And this is December. It was reported on this in December of 2021, and the Chinese listed it as mystery hut. So they were curious. Let's go take a real good look at this thing. And so, boy, it took a lot of ingenuity because when you've got this multi-million-dollar rover on a place where you can't just go and flip it back over, you got to, you got to be really careful about where you're driving this thing. So it took them quite a while, but they got there. And you got to like plan everything out. And it's the dark side of the moon, so it's not like we have a whole lot of pictures of this. But they made it there. And they took more photos of it. And then it was reported that, nope, it's just a rock that looks like a rabbit.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that's
always the explanation.
the
Right,
official, because, I mean, in the first photo, this looks like a giant cube off in the distance. And then the official photo that they release later saying this is the rock looks like a rabbit laying down. You're like, that I don't believe that's the same
Right.
object. Like, I really don't.
It wasn't just pixelated because they were on the horizon or
Right.
something.
And, you know, so many individuals who are in the know are always coming forward and saying, look, you know, they can't tell you what's really going on because it would destroy the fundamental base of society as we know it. And they're always like, I hear that more times in UFO videos and from people who were supposed to know what's going on than just about anything else. And if something like the soul recycling was really taking place,
Oh, man.
and you learned that that was like a real thing, and they had evidence for it, and they could show it to you, and this was factual, and these are the ones who were behind it, what would happen? What would happen? What would life matter?
People would lose their minds.
What would
Yeah.
life matter? Because you could die today, you're back tomorrow. You're just in a different body in a different location. The morality, ethics, everything. I mean, none of it would matter.
So one of the theories, you and I watched this video, and one of the theories was that the soul recycling, keeping you in a bad spot, emotionally, physically, things like that, so you could not reach enlightenment.
Exactly.
And so your soul would go back into there and be recycled.
Because the negative emotions are what they really crave, right?
Yes. And we all hear about the full moon and how it drives you a little nutso or all the crazies come out.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the opening, lunatic. I mean,
Yeah.
that word comes.
Lunatic babies.
Comes
That
from
word
the
comes
moon.
from the moon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, you know, is that the reason? And, you know, I know we often refer to certain religions and stuff, but that's because, you know, these ancients who wrote the basis for a lot of these religions had like the general same idea. And if you really look at it, most religions do. They're like, don't go to war. Be nice to each other.
Right.
It's that damn easy. And the Buddha said the same thing. He's like, you guys are just going to keep coming back here over and over and over until you
Yeah, get it
finally
figured
let
out.
it all go.
Mhm.
Stop the hate, stop the violence, and just realize that's not what it's about, and you'll leave this place. And maybe there is. Maybe there's some like
And that
stuff
almost
behind that.
fits in perfectly with the you're stuck in the third dimension.
Right.
That it's purposefully sending frequencies through the pyramids into the frequency of the earth, and we all know we're all frequency. And that's because they're trapping the souls.
And maybe they don't even need like any kind of visible device for these pyramids to operate. You know, like the Great Pyramid is not what it used to be.
No, not even
It used to
kinda.
have like used to be much more beautiful with the gold cap, but it's been raided and destroyed. Now we're left with kind of the base of what it was. But what if that doesn't even matter? The decoration was literally just the trim on the car. The engine's still there.
Right.
And they don't know that it's still running. They have no way of detecting that these things on all these ley lines have been running for years, because there's the theory that the you know, one thing that always gets me, people are like, oh, look at this video. It's a lizard man changing from like a lizard
Those are some of
back
my
into a human,
favorite.
or they're having difficulty maintaining their human appearance. But the moon theory says that's got nothing to do with it. They're not changing physically. They're putting the image in your head through the frequency put out by the moon. They're changing your sensory or, you know, processors in your brain. They're an alien, but your brain
They're a lizard
is
person. They're just projecting that
you're human.
you're not a lizard person.
And it's easy to do because we have 5 senses. I just got to manipulate those 5 senses, and it's done and done.
But like we worked on for 42 minutes before the show, sometimes there's glitches in the software.
It happens, man. It happens.
And the lizard guy's like, my forked tongue sticking out. Glob knot, do something, you know? And he's
Some guy's back there pushing buttons.
Turn it off and turn it back on again.
You know, how disappointed would you be if the aliens just had a normal name like Bob, though?
That would be very disappointing.
That would be
Albert.
disappointing.
Yeah.
Albert?
Yeah.
They'd better not.
Yeah.
I mean,
This is
it's
my
gotta-
alien friend Keith.
Yeah. It's Todd.
I'd be upset.
I would
you know,
too.
Yeah.
I would.
I mean, even if the names are that, they will intentionally make up stupid names just to appease us.
Oh,
Yes.
stupid. Come on. No.
Clip Clop is a fantastic
Yeah,
name.
glob nuts.
Well, I mean, humans are making pretty stupid names on our own now.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
true.
yeah.
we are.
That's
Oh,
true.
yeah. So, Emmy, what did you find? What did you drag up?
So, bringing into what we were talking about with having this device that causes negative emotions and things like that because they want our souls to be recycled, I started going on a little, jackalope hole, and that was on the claims of lunar connection with the human body. So, first off, these are like just a bunch of almost little conspiracy theories. Like ones you hear all the time, and technically they're conspiracy theories because
Right.
you don't know that there's no evidence for these things. So one of the things that is connected with the moon, apparently, is fertility. So a lot of people connected the average length of a moon cycle to the average length of a period cycle. And then they went all crazy about that, and they're like, yes, these are connected.
That the
Definitely.
moon cycle and menstruation are one and the same.
When did you find out the full moon was again? The 17th?
17th of
Yeah,
September.
September 17th. And I'm like, that's why I have cramps.
Yeah. It's a coming.
So obviously your menstrual cycle is connected to your fertility cycle. And so a lot of people have the theory that that's somehow, all connected. And so the average moon cycle is 29.5 days, and the average menstrual cycle is 28 days.
It's close.
And
It's
then,
close.
And then that goes into birth rate is another one of those things. People believe there's a higher birth rate during a full moon, but studies have all disproven that theory.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
I would think,
something about the
though-
full moon calls the children forth or something.
But cows, there is actually a correlation with the full moon and cows giving birth.
And why aliens abduct them.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's got to be a connection there, too.
Yeah.
Oh, I love cows.
Maybe they're wanting to study that. They're like, this don't make no sense. Go down and get a couple cows. We got to get this figured out.
Time it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wait till Bob's out there by himself.
going into, fertility birth rate, there is another one that I actually didn't know about, which is about blood loss during the full moon, which I thought was very interesting, especially when you think about fertility, menstrual cycles, things like that. So there's a superstition that people believe there's a correlation between higher blood loss during the full moons. My theory about that is we all know the moon affects the tides.
Yeah.
So what if it's affecting the liquid in our body?
Well, that's the thing, though. The gravitational pull of it's got to, there's got to be some
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
goofiness going
Yeah.
on with that.
And some people say that surgeons will not operate during full moons, which is not true.
There's
They're
probably,
just really careful.
there's probably a
Yes.
couple that won't.
But they believe blood does not clot during these times, like during the full moon, it's not clotting properly.
Huh.
Interesting.
So, and that's why I say I think there's like with this theory and like the moon and the tides, I think there's a correlation between that where you think liquid in your body and then
Yeah.
somehow the moon's affecting it.
But at the same time, like the platelets wouldn't be affected by
Yeah.
the moon in any way.
Your blood is a lot different than water.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think that the gravitational force of the moon certainly exists and there's got to be a measurable effect.
yeah.
But the gravitational force of the Earth is a lot stronger for
Right.
us because we're right there on the surface of it.
Right.
Yep.
So whatever percentage of the total gravitational effect that we're feeling, it's got to be very tiny, whatever the moon is doing.
So another one is people with epilepsy. A study found that a correlation between the number of seizures per day and the fraction of the moon that's illuminated at night.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is because again, when it comes to like the full moon, nothing has changed about the moon.
It's just the shadow.
It's just the shadow of the earth on
Yeah.
the moon. That's all it is.
So with the seizures, it's most likely due to the brightness of like the sliver of the moon that's showing
Yeah.
and the amount of brightness.
Okay, that I could see. Like,
Yes.
Because there is, you got to
No,
warm.
it's a spaceship, and they're controlling that.
they're hitting a button.
Bring this back around to reality, people.
That's right. Get it back on
Reality.
track. Get it back on track.
And then we've all heard about crimes being higher during
Yep.
the
Oh,
full
yeah.
moon.
Yeah. Is there statistically?
From what
Evidence for
what I researched, there was not because like it was just too many what's the
Other
word?
variables?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah,
See,
too many
when
variables
I commit
to
crime,
figure
I mean,
that out.
if I were going to commit crime, I would do it when it's like no moon.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
there's
'Cause
too
it's
much
darker.
light,
you need
man.
the darkness. Yes.
You can't cat burglar during a full moon,
It
right?
depends, it
Makes no
depends on
sense.
the crime, though, because crime is a pretty broad spectrum.
Mhm.
There
That's
could
true.
be crimes where that doesn't matter.
And
It's easier to hunt somebody down under a full moon, I suppose.
Yeah. Or cyber crimes, it makes no difference.
But to
Oh.
go into that theory a little bit more, I was telling Floyd, I've worked retail long enough to realize that the full moon does, in fact, have some sort of effect.
Well, and so here's the deal.
Yeah,
Maybe
so did you have like moments where it's like, man, there's a lot of Karens out there right now, and
Yeah,
then you just go
absolutely.
and happen to notice that it's a full moon.
Because I remember all of us, like wherever I was working, every time there were just like a bad person after a bad person that came in and so high maintenance and all that. We're like, it must be a full moon. So we'd look it up and sure as shit, it'd be a full moon.
Yeah.
So crazy.
Yeah.
Lunatic. There
Yeah.
you go.
lunatic. But at the same time, you got to think maybe there's something psychosomatic
Hmm.
or something, in our own minds where we're like, well, it's a full moon, let's go out. Or it's a full moon, let's head to the field because we can see more of what's going on out there. And then one thing leads to another, and all of a sudden that happens.
Hmm.
So I don't know because, in a lot of different places of the world, it's not the full moon that is the focus. It's the crescent. The perfect crescent
Sure.
bears much more importance.
Yeah, that
than a
shape's
It's so
full
beautiful.
symbolic.
Yeah.
it's very symbolic.
There's flags.
And in religions, in alchemy, in all kinds of things, it's more about the perfect crescent than it is about the full moon.
Yeah, and if you're a kid and you draw the moon, you draw a crescent. You don't draw a circle.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
The sun is the
Right.
circle.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
And you think about, those ancient books and ancient drawings, or even ancient paintings, even from like ancient times to the Renaissance. It's, that's the moon.
Right.
The sun is the ball. This is the moon. So I don't know. I think it kind of that's very cultural to me.
Yeah.
And I think just being more logical about it, that it's because most of the time that's the shape the moon is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's only full for a short amount of time, but it's crescents on both sides.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it spends most of its time in that shape.
When it's waxing and waning.
And look at you, moon nerd.
Nerd. But I mean, there's certain parts of the world where that crescent is much clearer, and or at least it feels that way. I said it in the beginning, I've been in certain parts of the desert, and like being out there in the desert, that flag that you're referring to, you've got the crescent moon and the star. I have seen that in the sky, just the most perfect crescent with the star right there.
Well, I'm sure it depends on like light pollution and things like
Oh, yeah.
that
Oh,
too.
it's
How
just-
how clearly you can
Yeah.
see that shape.
And it's beautiful. Like when
Yeah.
you're standing there, you're like, okay, yeah, I'd make that a flag too.
I always
'cause
think
that's
it's
awesome.
really cool when you can just barely see the dark side of
Yeah.
the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a faint outline. of it.
Yeah, so you
Yep.
see like the perfect crescent, and then it's just you see this dark spot next to it, and I just think that's so amazing.
I looking at it through a telescope because you can really see the spherical shape
Yeah,
on the edges of it and see the shape of the craters and the depth of it.
Oh wow, you can kind of almost like a 3D image.
You
see
can
it.
definitely tell it's 3D.
Wow, I've never looked at it through a
You got to have a filter unless it's the right, real smoky or something and everything's dim.
right.
But because usually it's too bright. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
What else did you find?
So this one is actually it's a theory, but then they did studies and found it to be true that there is a higher number of motorcycle fatalities during a full moon.
Wow.
So they did a study of over 13,000 motorcyclists killed in the nighttime crashes and found that there were 5.3% more fatalities at nights with full moons.
That's a considerable number.
It is, yeah.
That makes sense to me, though, because I won't ride from deer 30, I call it, when the deer
Yep.
start
Yes.
coming out on. But there's been some times where there's a full moon and you're like, it's bright enough, I can go. So maybe people are like, oh, yeah, I'll take
Yeah.
a night
It's a
ride.
great night.
And then,
Yeah.
That, and also, the moon, if it's bright enough, it's reflecting off of certain things, causing certain distractions.
Sure.
And maybe causing, almost like illusions, like something's there when it's not because it's just a reflection. So there's a lot that goes into that. But
Or it's the crazy people that are out and they're just running into them.
but I thought that was interesting. Another one is that the stock market is apparently involved with the moon. And
That would make sense with lizard people, though.
Right.
Yeah, controlled
Yes.
somehow.
Yeah.
So with stocks going up closer to the new moon and going down closer to the full moon. But
Interesting.
Has
I don't-
anyone done a
I don't
study
know
on
if
that?
there's
Like
any evidence
no
to
numbers?
that.
Yeah.
I have no numbers.
That'd be
on that.
fascinating to do numbers on that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I wouldn't understand a word of it, but yeah.
Yeah, and you'd have to factor out whether or not it's just people reacting to the fact that, oh yeah, because there's a lot of superstition involved in.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
just
Yes.
sports and stock markets, so much based on chance that
Yep.
there's if it's based on any kind of chance, there's gonna be a superstition attached to it.
And this one is the one I'd be really curious to see the studies on, which is that there is a larger number of suicides during a full moon.
Oh,
Death by
yeah.
suicide, yeah. So I'd like to see the studies on that one
Yeah.
because, I do. Personally, I believe the moon affects your mood.
A mood.
Yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Well,
No,
there's a
I
lot of
would say
people who
that-
do.
We evolved for a lot of generations with the moon as part of our ecosystem.
Mhm.
So I think it has to be, it's ingrained into us in some way. And
Only
certainly
for
the-
like the last 3,000 to 5,000
yeah,
years,
depending on where
Steve.
it showed up.
Obviously.
But that's a
God.
long time. 3,000 years is a long
That's
time.
a long time.
For a lot
Well,
of generations.
And if so, let's say that it hasn't been here the whole time we have, or that we didn't show up at the same time. If you really take into effect and the gravitational pull from that celestial body,
Mhm.
that is going to have some sort of effect. Who knows what? Might be minor, might not mean anything.
Yep.
But think about what it does to the tides of the damn ocean. For Pete's
Right.
My
sake.
thought is they brought the moon in to stabilize the Earth a little bit more. If the moon
And to
wasn't
keep track of us.
Yes, if the moon wasn't. Maybe I don't think that, but
No, you said yes.
It-
Edit out the.
So it's already on record.
Cut out the part where she denies that.
if the moon, wasn't always here, they saw how unstable the Earth was without something there, and they know all the science mumbo jumbo to be like, okay, let's
Well,
bring,
they built a moon,
Yeah.
for God's sake.
let's
They got it here. so
bring
yeah.
this in,
Yeah.
and see how it goes, and
Yeah,
then
they didn't just
yeah,
build it; they transported it.
Yeah,
somehow.
oh yeah. absolutely.
That's
They
got to be
brought
a
it.
feat on its own.
exactly. So that's
I
my
think they
thought on
brought it in tow behind Planet X. And they're like, this thing's weighing us down. Let's
Cut
just
it
leave
out.
it here.
Cut it out.
And it's the ugly old trailer. It's just gray. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't want that thing.
Well, we don't want it, so take it to the second house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
just
why
drop
doesn't
at
it
the
look
second
better? I
house.
mean, if you were going to build something like that, why not make it look more interesting than just a big lump of
But
grayness?
Oh, but I
But to
love the
build-
moon. I think it's beautiful.
to build on what Emmy was talking about, what if that stabilization also included the idea that there's a lot of meteorites hitting this planet,
Yes.
and there's life down there. So I'm an intelligent life that has the ability to do this. I want to crossbreed my DNA within a primate to mine me gold.
I
But-
like where this is going.
But I don't like the fact that there's so many meteors that come in and could just wipe out the life of this place.
Well,
Or
plus they have an affinity for the big lizards that got wiped out because they're lizard people. So they're like, hey, enough of the lizard hatred.
But-
Meteorites. Yeah.
think about. So I put a moon out
A
there,
shield.
and it acts as a shield for some of the smaller stuff, and it gives life a chance to really take hold and take off. A lot of people don't appreciate Jupiter for
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah,
If it wasn't for Jupiter, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee that thing sucks more things away from us than what we know. And I think maybe the moon, in that theory, could fit within there where it's like, well, throw it up there. It'll catch some of the stuff and
Yeah.
allow life to
Yeah,
you
Jupiter
know.
catches the big stuff, and the moon catches the stuff that it misses.
that it misses. Maybe.
Well, and, so they build the moon, and then they're like, well, we can't just have this shiny ball. It's going to reflect sunlight and burn them like ants with a magnifying glass. Cover it in old crap.
Yeah,
Dust
We
it
got
up a
laying
little.
around.
Yeah.
And that's why the rocks on the moon are much older than the rocks of the Earth.
They dump all the construction debris on it.
Yeah.
Just dump it. Yeah.
Yes.
Man, what a fantastic, theory. You build it at your planet, wherever that is, and then you transport it there, and you're like, yeah, it's too shiny.
Yeah.
It's too shiny. So you dig it out a little bit, and you just throw all the junk on top.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, it's a good thing they voted on the convex rather than the concave shape, because then it would have focused that beam.
Right.
Just burned us in a path all the way around.
And we don't know that didn't happen.
Yeah, maybe that was phase one.
Just trial and error. Yep, exactly.
Like, no, scrap that one.
Scrap it. I don't know. Steve, what do you think about this? You're someone who's very, very grounded. You know the NASA science behind it.
Being the shill that I am.
The
Yes.
Apollo shirt.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a big rock. I think it's probably less dense, not because it's hollow, but just because it's less dense. There's probably porous nature to it of some sort. I don't know on what scale. I haven't seen any evidence of there being any bases on the moon. Whether the moon itself is a base.
Well, I'll show you some.
I mean, I did some research and I saw, some transcripts and stuff of astronauts talking about it, but a lot of that stuff just seems like it was made up. I don't see any evidence linking it back to a NASA source.
Mhm.
And there's some language in there that doesn't seem consistent with the way NASA typically talks. Yeah, I don't know. They're cool theories, and there's some stuff that doesn't make sense, like the coincidence of it being exactly the right size and the right distance between us and the sun to make eclipses happen. I mean, it could just be a coincidence, but it's an astounding one.
Right.
Mhm.
And the age of it, we don't know how it got there. There's a lot of stuff that's unanswered, and so there's certainly room for fun theories.
It's kind of like the ocean, how we don't know a whole ton about the
See,
ocean.
and again, though, I think the moon and the ocean are very similar in that we don't know that much about them because they don't want us to know that much
Yeah.
about them.
Yeah, and I think the only reason we haven't been back is it ties in with the reason we went there in the first place. It was all political, the reason we went there in the first place.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And if JFK hadn't died, I don't think we would have made that much of an effort to do it as quickly as we did.
Mhm.
I think we would have taken our time and been more careful about it. But we got lucky and no one died in that effort.
Yay!
But I think as soon as we won the space race, it very quickly became less important to keep going back.
Yeah.
Right. It was like at one point, like the whole world watched television for one day. And then everyone's like,
Yeah, by the third mission after that,
no
it
one was watching.
Yeah, no one
Yeah.
cared anymore. And we got a few more out of it until it became so. I mean, it was so expensive to do it, and extremely risky too. I mean, people could have died at any one of those.
Yeah.
Points along the
Absolutely.
way.
Almost had a horrific event with Apollo 13.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
they
It's
almost-
because it's unlucky number 13.
Right.
Yeah,
so-
I would have gone from 12 to 14. I mean,
Yeah,
You
just
know,
skip it.
Yeah.
It's just like a hotel. Don't they have? They like don't
Skip the
have
13th floor.
relabel the floor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, if you're on floor 14, you're really on floor 13. Sorry.
Yeah. So that brings up another question: does changing the name of it change what it is?
I don't think so.
How important is the name?
I
Yeah.
think language is very important. So I would
Yeah.
go with that. If you change the name of it, it is not floor 13.
Yeah, I mean, the exact same ship, if you name it the Titanic, people probably wouldn't go on it. So the name probably does matter.
Yeah.
That's a show that we should do because I don't believe it was the Titanic.
Oh, that is one we should
Oh,
do.
I
it was
believe
the
that-
Britannica.
Yep.
Oh,
The Olympic.
Or the
The
Olympic.
Olympic.
Yep.
That
I would love to hear this theory. I love
Oh,
everything.
yeah.
That's a
oh
show
my
then,
gosh.
because I know a
And
lot
how
about the
about-
Titanic.
Okay, I am so
You
excited.
take all of the people that don't believe in a centralized banking system, you build a giant boat, and then you put them on it, and
Yeah.
then they all go away.
And look at when the income tax
sinking of the
started.
not
Titanic
realize there's
was
so
a
many
massive
conspiracy
insurance
theories.
scam.
Oh my gosh.
That's a show for sure.
That's a show.
I'm so excited.
And there's like photographic evidence
Yeah.
that they changed the name, switched all the cups, all of it. They moved it from the Olympic to the Titanic
wow.
and vice versa. And then they went off and almost intentionally
Yep.
sunk that ship.
Full speed into the iceberg.
And
Wow.
because they're like, we need the insurance money because White Star was going down.
And we need a lot
Okay.
of these people.
No more spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a show.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a fantastic.
I am
that
curious to
theory.
see, I have an Artemis shirt too. That
Oh,
I
yes.
could have worn today. It'd be interesting to see if we eventually get back there. A lot of these theories are going to either be answered or have more questions.
Right.
Well, see,
The
and that's,
Artemis
that's
is
the hard part. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. I mean that whole thing is amazing. If you
Yeah.
don't know what that is, you gotta just do a quick Google search of it or whatever and read up a little bit about it. It's
Mhm.
pretty amazing.
The farther I start to research, because I compared to how I used to be, I was just glancing over conspiracy theories. And since we started to do this show, which was intended to be, just a comedy about four friends sitting around having fun we're never going to solve anything, and we kind of have a laugh at all of it. But you start to realize,
Except for Aaron.
Yeah.
Takes it very
Well,
seriously.
I'm very
the thing of it is, though,
serious.
is like you start to realize how much we've been lied to, and
there's a great potential for it.
yeah, and you start looking around, and you're like, God, I'm the one funding all of this stuff. You're the one funding.
Right.
You're funding all of this stuff, and they're not. From what I can tell, they're not telling us everything. And
Which,
of course,
again, it brings up the question: Why?
Why?
Are you
Why are you
editing
keeping
things
this all-
out
Yeah.
of these photos in the moon?
and maybe there's like some great grand plan. Once again, something that we all need and want, right? Someone somewhere is in control. I don't have to worry about it. All this chaos is actually one day going to make sense. It won't. But to think that like there's the shadow government that understands this is the truth, and you as a species can't handle it. You as a society can't handle it. So we are literally protecting you from yourself, because everything will crash from here on out, and we can't have that happen. And the more conspiracy theories I look into, some of them are pretty whacked out. Don't get me wrong, where you're just like, I don't think that's true. You are not the son of God. Like, I don't think that's real. And I don't mean the religion. There was a man who claimed he was the son of God, and you're like,
There's one right now.
yeah, he's
they
running
can't
around.
find.
He's running around. But I mean, some of them are pretty out there. But other ones, you're like, I don't think that we were told everything about the moon landings.
Well, the moon landing itself always really kind of makes me wonder when they have, and it's iconic video of the lunar module taking off,
Yeah.
right? There's a camera that films it and pans, watching it take off. And there's people, you can see the wires or whatever. Wires or not, maybe. They didn't have the technology at that time to have a camera on the moon that panned up to watch this thing take off.
Yeah, they did.
I was going to say, but then again, it's
Ask
NASA.
Steve.
Yeah,
You
they-
know?
I think
true.
that's
They-
Apollo.
Ask Steve.
I think it's Apollo 17 you're talking about, and it took several tries to get it right because there was a delay in the command to make it go. Boop.
And didn't that one camera that they left there, they got it from, I can't remember who they got it from, but it was like a $2.3 million camera.
And it's still sitting there because it was on the lunar
Right.
rover,
Mhm.
and that's where they filmed it from. 'Cause
Yeah.
They parked it away, and then they aimed it. Yeah.
I don't know.
well,
Stanley Kubrick.
I know. You got that Kubrick theory, man. And if you watch The Shining, there's a lot of stuff in
Oh,
The
yeah.
Shining where you're like, he was trying to tell the world that he filmed them. But that's a
Or
whole
maybe
conspiracy
he was
theory.
leaning into it.
That's true.
Who knows?
There could be that.
Who knows? And he was a genius. Like the man, IQ wise, Kubrick was a genius. So he may have been playing all of us for a loop, for a joke.
Yeah.
For what a lasting legacy to just
Yeah.
troll the human species. I'm
Here's
sorry,
my-
but it's funny.
The one thing that I cannot get past for Spaceship Moon is that it's rusting.
Yeah.
And you can find a lot of information about it is rusting, but they don't know why it's rusting.
Mhm.
Why? Why is it rusting?
Hmm.
I mean, is it like at the end of its life cycle? Like the aliens were like, it's good for 5,000 years. Don't worry about it.
Like we said,
We
it's
don't
the
have to
car
seal
in
it.
the
Yeah.
yard. It's the old car
And it starts
that they
rusting
just
and you're
let
like,
it sit in the
"Oh,
yard.
shit."
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
what are we going to do?
Earth's like the
Intergalactic police.
Detroit of the universe. They just leave it dumped right there.
We're gonna look up there one day, and there's just gonna be a big yellow ticket. Get it gone. Your neighbors over in Mars
Yeah,
are complaining.
Yeah, get it out of here.
You got 4,000 years to move it, and now
You guys
been there
just
too
let
long.
it sit there. Oh man, I don't know. I've got a lot of different theories. And what's really fun about some of these things is you start to, the deeper you get into these conspiracy theories, you start connecting all of them together.
Mhm.
You
Oh,
know
yeah.
what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Where like
yeah, you got the yarn running around
Oh
the house.
yeah,
Oh my gosh.
absolutely. That is not, just something that people make up. You do that in your head because you're like, that would make sense
Mhm.
if we started on Mars.
Mhm.
Okay,
Right.
but because on Mars is an isotope, I believe it's an isotope that can only be made through nuclear war. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But on Mars, they're like, oh, well, it's naturally there. Well, there's no way that we can find this thing naturally except when a nuclear bomb explodes. It is all over the planet. So my theory, we started on Mars. We also have what's called ghost DNA, which is DNA in the human species where we're like, we mated with someone, we don't know who.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened around, like 50,000 years ago or something. And they're like, well, this species must have just disappeared. Well, that's when all of a sudden we changed and we wiped out every other hominid on the face of the planet. So start on Mars, blow everything up. We're like, well, there's this planet over here. Let's go there. So we go there. We mate with the native species.
Maybe we're the aliens.
We're the aliens.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy who wrote a book that contains all these theories. Like he talks about why do we get bad backs? Because you're not from here.
Right.
Why do you have a bad knee? Why do you have bad hips? Why is this
Gravity's a lot
universal?
different.
Yeah.
How come you get a sunburn if you evolved here?
Right.
That makes no sense whatsoever. Where's your fur? Yeah, none of our evolution makes sense, and there is that ghost DNA.
Well, and you look at Mars has pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
The moon has pyramids. We have pyramids. I mean, there's a lot of yarn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Tesla, really tapped into that. I think Tesla was onto it. I think he was the one who was rediscovering that you just reach up to the nether, man. It's endless power.
Mm-hmm.
And every single scientist who's come forward with zero gravity and endless power disappears or dies under strange circumstances.
Mhm.
Because the United States government has got a law that says if you discover something that is going to affect my economy, I can bury the patent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Done. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of patents buried because it'll affect the economy.
There's a patent somewhere for the moon being
Yeah.
a spaceship.
This is Moon 2.0. We call it Luna. It's kind of nice. She'll rust after 4,000 or 5,000 years. But yeah, you could just tap at the roof up. You guys can take this one.
He's real solid.
Throw it over there to that blue ball. What do you got all those little monkeys running around over there? Trust me, you can observe for years out of this thing.
You might get some
got a
lunatics.
sunroof.
Yeah.
God, can you imagine?
It might drive some people a little crazy.
Yeah,
but-
it's got a bad thing to it. You a bunch of aliens hiding out in the moon, and we start crashing parts of our spaceship. They're like, those bastards are throwing shit at us.
Right, yeah.
Look at this. You give them textbooks, they sniff the ink. What the hell is wrong with these kids?
Ah.
That totally makes sense. That's the best explanation out of all of this.
That's
go.
what it is, man.
Yeah.
Model 2.5. All the potato ones are like, they're the old ones. that
potato
nobody really
ones.
likes. Yeah, the
That's
potato
where those
moons.
were the prototypes.
Yeah.
Just tossing them out there. Well, is the moon a spaceship? We don't know. I think has the moon always been here? It's something else that we don't know, but ancient writers did say time before the moon. A lot of things in our ancient history we haven't got figured out. And the moon, unfortunately, has got to be filed underneath that shit we don't know category.
Right.
Aaron, since it wasn't your idea to do this subject, but this is one that you've been
No, we've been
chewing.
talking about
You've been
this one
chewing
for
at
a
this one
while.
for a while, so I'm going to
Yeah.
give you the last word.
It's interesting because some theologians speculate that when they say the time before the moon, that was just their way of saying forever ago. That it was just linguistically what they used at the time. I personally, after knowing about this for a long time and then really researching into it, it seems super sketchy to me for whatever reason. When you have the ancient saying the time before the moon, and then the writings about how the entire planet was different before it got here, the flood theories. I mean, this is the yarn that you're connecting all of these things with. And the fact that it is rusting, the fact that no matter how wide the impact craters are. They're pretty much uniformly the same depth, meaning there's something harder under there. The fact that it rings like a bell, that it is lighter, that there are all of these caverns in there. If nothing else, it's a huge mystery. Is it out of the realm that it just showed up one day? I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. Every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's the moon. Like, it's always been here.
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of thinking maybe it hasn't.
You've been watching Jackalopes Explore?